The Ranger rookies beat the Flyer rookies 5-2. And did Noah Laba just become this team's third-line center?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1379 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Rangers bounce back, and they come away with a 5-2 victory over the Flyers in Game 2 of this two-game rookie series. As I mentioned in the last episode, obviously the Ranger rookies had a tough overtime loss to the Flyer rookies in Game 1. But as I said, it's never too early to say the Rangers beat the Flyers, and that is indeed what happened on Saturday, Game 2 of this rookie series. So the Rangers do salvage a split out of this two-game set. And one of the biggest storylines, I think, coming out of this camp, and I mean, the camp is still going on. They've got a couple more practices, but obviously the games are the aspect of it that gets the most attention. But one of the biggest talking points coming in, and certainly coming out of this, is the play of Noah Laba, somebody that I think his stock has improved very rapidly with the New York Rangers, a former fourth-round pick, somebody that I think a lot of Ranger fans feel could eventually make an impact in the NHL with the New York Rangers, potentially as soon as opening night this season. I think it might be a little bit premature for that, but who's to say there's no chance? You know, there's at least a chance, and I think Laba, if nothing else, certainly improved his stock over the course of these two games, and you can see why he's sort of become a little bit of a fan favorite and somebody that does seem to be a fast riser among New York Ranger prospects. It was basically all on display during these two games here. He can score, he can hit, he can play physical hockey. He's got pretty good size, he's got pretty good speed, a self-described two-way center, and somebody that's going to play a 180-foot game. I mean, that's good stuff. He seems like he really is rounding into form as a very solid all-around player, is Noah Laba. And, you know, we talked about him a little bit after Game 1, and he's obviously out there centering the Rangers' de facto top line of himself, Brandon Othmann, and Gabe Perreault. You know, Game 1, and we highlighted this when we talked about it, he had a great play in the corner in the offensive zone, went in there, won a 50-50 puck, used his frame and his body positioning to do so, and then made an outstanding backhand pass to the center of the ice to Brandon Othmann, who took care of the rest. He was able to turn and fire the puck home from short range, and that's all well and good, but Noah Laba really made that play happen. And in addition to that, Noah Laba in Game 1 also had a very solid game, but I thought he was even better, even more noticeable in Game 2. To begin with, he was one of many, many players on both sides that were involved in, shall we say, some extracurriculars, a lot of nastiness. I mean, a little bit of that in Game 1, a lot of it in Game 2. It felt like the longer and longer that these games went, the more and more these two teams just did not like each other. And it's Rangers-Flyers, so I'd expect nothing less. But Laba very early in this game, I think it was the first shift of the game, or, you know, somewhat early in the first period, ended up getting into a shoving match after one of the whistles. You had a situation where Othmann drew a penalty while the Rangers were shorthanded and still managed to get into the Flyer zone, put a centering pass to Noah Laba, and Laba, you know, was able to get behind the defense. Wasn't quite able to finish from the doorstep there, but obviously a great scoring chance nevertheless. Just a better save on behalf of the Flyer goalie. There was also a situation where Laba hustled to negate an icing. That too was in the first period. And then in the second period, I love this shift for Noah Laba. You know, the Rangers didn't score or anything like that, but you have a situation here where Laba, in one shift, he wins a faceoff clean back to the point. It was an offensive zone faceoff for the Rangers. Now, the Flyers eventually got the puck out of their own zone, but the Rangers recover it, and then you've got Laba basically exploding up the right side over the blue line. It was very close to being offside. It was kind of borderline 50-50, but they didn't call it offside. Laba gains the zone, puts a shot just wide on the short side, and then not too long after this, the puck is in the corner in the offensive zone, and Laba once again wins a board battle, wins a 50-50 puck to keep the offensive zone possession alive for the Rangers. Now, again, they did not score on this possession, but you're seeing just why Laba, in the course of just one shift here, three very separate, very unique plays made by Noah Laba to obviously help the Rangers. And again, very, very obvious why, you know, this guy's stock has been rising as quickly as it has among New York Ranger prospects. And then you had a situation a little bit later where Laba did indeed score. You have Brent Offman basically faking a defender out of his skates as he gained the offensive zone. And it's a 2-on-1. Offman goes up the right side. He passes to his left to Laba, and Laba able to slam it home from the other side of the net. That made it 4-2 in favor of the Rangers in the second period. So a big goal there for Laba. But when you look at, overall, the whole body of work here, as far as Laba's stats, I mean, a goal and an assist in the two games combined. But overall, very solid showing. And you can see why, again, there's a lot of people clamoring for Laba to potentially make the opening night roster. Now, I think it's a little bit early for that. And part of the reason is because he's only got 11 pro games under his belt. He was able to join the Hartford Wolfpack late last season, played in 11 games with them, had 3 goals and 2 assists in those 11 games. And this is somebody that before that did score at a very high level with Colorado College. He was there for 3 seasons. The last 2 seasons combined, 30 goals, 33 assists for a total of 63 points in 65 games. He was also a plus 30 in that time. So a very productive, high-scoring player in college as well. And again, does he make the opening night roster? I'm going to say probably not. I'm not going to rule it out. And look, I could come around if he continues to play like this during training camp, during the preseason games as well. And if we're in a situation where maybe Brodzinski and Parsonen don't really show that well for themselves during the preseason, then okay, if Laba wins the third center job outright, fair and square, then that's great, and he should be given a chance just like everybody else. But I'm kind of in a situation right now where I feel like once training camp comes and goes, once the preseason comes and goes, we're going to see a situation where Laba is probably going to be sent to the Hartford Wolfpack to continue to hone his craft. And I think right now, it kind of goes back to something that we talked about as it pertains to Gabe Perreault, why I prefer him there with Hartford to start the season. Let these guys kind of get acclimated to pro hockey. And I know with Perreault, he played a couple of games with the Rangers last season. Still, though, I like that as a bridge between college hockey and the New York Rangers. We've seen the Rangers rush prospects in the past. I think to start this upcoming season, you can get by with either Brodzinski or Parson centering the third line. Laba, when he's ready, you call him up. Make sure you have a role for him, but you call him up and you let him do his thing. I do think one way or another, we will see Laba, if nothing else, at least make his NHL debut this season. Even if it's the cup of coffee treatment like we saw in the past with Brian Offman, like we saw in the past with Will Cooley, where they're only up for a handful of games, that's fine. But I do think, again, we will see Laba with the New York Rangers this upcoming season. I think that could be a lot of fun. And who knows, maybe he gets called up and he sticks. He just never gets sent back down. That's at least possible too. But to start the season, my prediction and what I would have the Rangers do is start Laba in the AHL. Exercise some caution here. Better to call him up a little bit too late than a little bit too early, and he's overwhelmed by the NHL level. Yeah, keep in mind, these are all young kids that he's out there against. The NHL is another step up for sure. But I'll certainly be keeping a close eye on Noah Laba going forward throughout training camp, throughout the preseason, as I'm sure a lot of you will as well. But Laba was not the only young Ranger that impressed in this tournament. We got another opening night roster hopeful, somebody that I think probably has an even better chance than Laba does of cracking the opening night roster. That would be Scott Morrow. He was a big-time standout in each of these 2 games, especially the second of the 2. So we're going to talk about him and his chances of making the opening night roster. Will he be there? Should he be there? We'll answer those questions in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire somebody yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. We've all been in that spot where we need to hire somebody like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is another setback. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidate right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. All right, let's go keep everything rolling here on this newest edition of Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out to the everydayers. As always, thank you guys so much for supporting this podcast. In our next episode, it's probably going to be best and worst case scenarios on Will Cooley. We're going to continue our offseason series where we just take a look at every player that we project to make the opening night roster, talk about everything that could go right, talk about everything that could go wrong, and basically just have a season outlook. And Will Cooley's going to be up next. And then we'll also have some final thoughts. It's probably going to be Wednesday on the conclusion of rookie camp for the New York Rangers, because it's Monday as I'm recording this. They're out there on the ice right now. They're also going to be out there on the ice on Tuesday. No more games against the Flyers or anything like that, but a couple more practices. So when it all wraps up, we'll kind of have a conclusion on here as well. Might even do some Kirill Kaprizov talk as well. His name has really been in the headlines recently. The Wild offering him this giant contract, all this money. He doesn't want to sign the extension. He's a free agent after this upcoming season. Could the Rangers be in play? It's at least possible. We'll discuss that as well. But for right now, let's go ahead and keep the focus on Game 2 of this Rangers-Flyers rookie series, and specifically on Scott Morrow, somebody who I thought was a big-time standout in both games. And for anybody that might need a little bit of a refresher here, Scott Morrow was acquired by the Rangers in the K'Andre Miller trade. K'Andre Miller went to the Canes. The Rangers got a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and Scott Morrow. And you see the picks, and that's kind of where your eyes go to when the news breaks. But Scott Morrow is anything but a throw-in. There were several people that cover the Carolina Hurricanes that believe that Scott Morrow is one of, if not their best prospect. And again, it's the rookie series here, but be that as it may, Scott Morrow showed very, very nicely for himself in these two games. It's funny because he actually had a little bit of a hiccup early in game 1. The Rangers were on the power play, and he was carrying the puck up the ice, and it looked like he was going to gain the offensive zone, no problem. He had good speed, seemed like he had some space to operate. All of a sudden, he just stops and throws a pass back into the Ranger zone, and I don't think he realized that there was a Flyer still there, and the Flyer intercepted the pass, and they got a decent scoring chance out of it, did the Flyers. But that was really it. He was on the ice for Philly's overtime winner, but just seconds before Philly won game 1 in overtime, Morrow made a great defensive play to deflect the shot out of play. So, can't really go crazy about that in a negative way for Scott Morrow. Overall, he was really good. The 2 games combined, he gets a goal and 3 assists. And I also just want to throw this out there really quickly here, and we'll get back to Morrow specifically in just a second. But I did see, certain people in the comment section on YouTube, certain people on social media, whoever it might be, basically kind of like downplaying the accomplishments of guys like Scott Morrow and Brian Hoffman in this 2-game series here, because in their mind, they're so much older and they're so much more experienced than some of the players that they're going up against. It's not entirely true. And I got to give a big shout out to David on Twitter. A lot of you guys follow him as well. He posts a whole bunch of highlights, during the games while they're happening. So big shout out to David. But he posted a screenshot of a partial list of some of the Flyer prospects that were competing in this 2-game rookie series. The Flyers, per this post here, had a 24-year-old, a 23-year-old, 6 22-year-olds, and 3 21-year-olds. And for basis of comparison here, Brandon Hoffman is 22, Scott Morrow is 22. So it's not like, they're 4-5 years older than all these guys, and they've played all these NHL games, and they're going up against a bunch of 18-year-old 7th-round draft picks. That's not the case at all. Now, do they have a little bit more experience than some of the other players? Are they slightly older than some of the other players? Yes, but to act like they're completely mismatched in their favor in these 2 games, I don't think that's true either. Now, you do expect Brandon Hoffman to be one of the better players. You do expect Scott Morrow to be one of the better players, but they went out there and they did that. And I think that's a positive thing. And for anybody that sees that as a negative, I don't really get it. Would you have rather them struggled? That wouldn't have been good. But we said coming in, Brandon Hoffman is one of the guys that really need to show up in this series and play well and be in the middle of everything. And he was. And to a lesser extent, that was also true of Scott Morrow. I thought Morrow was great. In the first period in game 2 here, the Rangers had a really short power play, less than 30 seconds, but they were able to take advantage, and they scored. Noah Laba had a shot that was blocked. Othman was able to pick it up. A little pitch and catch with Scott Morrow. Othman then passed the puck in deep to Dylan Robrick in the corner. Robrick centers it for Morrow. Morrow with a one-timer, and he scores. Morrow, obviously known as something of an offensive defenseman, but he's got good size too. Hopefully the defensive parts of his game catch up to his offense, and we might have a heck of a player if that's the case. But that actually opened the scoring, gave the Rangers a 1-0 lead. Then the second period, this stood out to me as well. The Rangers had a 5-on-3 power play, and you've got Morrow. His passing, his ice vision was on full display in these 2 games, and perhaps none more so than right here. He made a great pass across the ice to Gabe Perreault in deep on the other side of the net, and then Morrow passed quickly across the top of the crease on the other side to Yaroslav Smalash. and he's able to score on a little tap in from the doorstep to make it 3-1. Now, on one hand, yes, the Rangers did have a 5-on-3 advantage, and so I guess it's not as impressive because the Flyers only have 3 skaters on the ice, but regardless, it was still a beautiful pass. Morrow did a great job finding Perreault on the other side there, making a perfect pass, and making this whole thing happen here. Morrow looked really good quarterbacking the power play during these 2 games. And, overall, I just think it was a positive for Morrow. I think something else that was a positive for Morrow was the fact that the Rangers had him wearing a letter during these 2 games here. If I'm not mistaken, it was just Morrow and Brandon Offman. They were the 2 Ranger alternate captains. And, I mean, again, he's out there with guys with less experience than he has, but still, I think it's a vote of confidence from the coaching staff in both Morrow and Brandon Offman to, wear letters during this 2-game series here. And something that we did not that long ago that I'm going to talk about right now real quick is we had an episode where we took a look at Ranger roster battles and position battles and, who's going to be the 5th man on the top power play unit and who's going to be the 6th defenseman and who's going to be the 3rd line center, all this stuff, right? And these storylines will continue to play out going forward, and we'll certainly keep an eye on all of them as the action unfolds here throughout training camp and the preseason. But one of the battles that I highlighted for that episode was Scott Morrow versus Urho Vakanainen. I really think going into the season, you're looking at a situation where it's going to be one of those 2 that's the 6th defenseman on opening night. Obviously, barring an injury or a trade or something completely unforeseen, that's what you're looking at. Because the 5 defensemen that are going to be out there on opening night, barring, again, anything unexpected, Fox, Gavrikov, Borgen, Schneider, and Susie. And I know some people are not happy with what Susie did last season. Clean slate this year. He walked into a dumpster fire last year. I wasn't thrilled with how he played either, but let's at least give him a chance this season. He is a veteran defenseman, and we'll see how it goes there. But I do think it's going to end up being Morrow versus Vakanainen for that number 6 job. Now, Vakanainen, obviously, he's not going to be playing in a tournament like this. He's like in his mid-20s. I think he's like 25, maybe even 26 at this point. Vakanainen was okay last season, but I do think there's certainly more upside with somebody like Scott Morrow. There's certainly more offense to his game as well. They're about the same build. I do think Vakanainen plays a more physical brand of hockey than Morrow does. But I really feel like the battle's on. And obviously, Vakanainen, he's not going to play in this series, so he didn't do anything. It's not like he was out there playing poorly during this 2-game set here. He hasn't done anything to lose ground, but Morrow, I think, has already put his best foot forward in these first 2 games here. And I really do think the battle is on for that opening night roster spot. Now, if Morrow wins it outright, then I think you're looking at a situation where Vakanainen is your healthy scratcher, number 7 defenseman. If Vakanainen wins the battle, though, then I think the Rangers send Scott Morrow to the Wolfpack, and he starts his season there. Morrow is waiver exempt, so he would not have to pass through waivers. The same cannot be said for Urho Vakanainen. So Vakanainen will make the team one way or another. It just depends on if he's in, if he gets beat out by Scott Morrow, because if Morrow beats him out, Morrow will get that number 6 defenseman spot for the New York Rangers. But like I said, I'm kind of rooting for Morrow. It's nothing against Vakanainen, but I do think there's more upside with Morrow. And you kind of want to win that trade, right? The Rangers, they trade away K'Andre Miller, and I feel like they did what they had to do. But now you're looking at a situation where we're not going to know how that 1st and 2nd round draft pick turn out for a while, right? Or how the Rangers are going to use those 2 picks. But we will know pretty quickly, depending on when he's dressing for games with the Rangers, how Scott Morrow is going to fare on Broadway. So definitely looking forward to that. And I think Morrow's got a real shot at it. I think he's got, I'd put it like 55-45. I think Morrow's going to make this team. I really do. And he will continue to be judged on how he does in training camp and on how he does in the preseason games. But I think opening night, you're looking at Scott Morrow out there on that 3rd pair, that 3rd defense pair for the New York Rangers. And Vakanainen, could be very likely the odd man out. But in just a second, we're going to highlight some of the rough stuff in this game last night. This got nasty, as we kind of expected to do. It is a form of Rangers Flyers. You kind of just anticipate that the temperature is going to go up and these teams are going to be battling and at each other's throats. And this did not disappoint. So we're going to break down a couple of the fights, a couple of the rough stuff from game 2 of this rookie set. We will get there in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you will get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is the best because it's got something for you no matter how you like to bet. there's player props, or you can build a same game parlay, or you can even jump in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It is quick, it is easy, it is the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers by, highlighting some of the rough stuff. This got nasty. This got ugly. There were players at each other's throats. Yaroslav Smolash was one of several players that just felt like they were in the middle of everything. I mean, he really stood out in that way. But you've got two emotionally charged games here. Young players on both sides, guys that are trying to get the respective teams to take notice of them, to impress them in one way or another. And one way to do that is obviously to play with a ton of intensity, ton of energy, ton of passion. We saw that both ways in this two-game set here. But it's pretty crazy because it got started on literally the first shift of the game. You had the Flyers getting a scoring chance early. Really nice save by Callum Tung, who, quick side note here, was very, very good in this game. He made some really good saves early in this game. Also, a couple of back-to-back saves at the very end of the second period. A couple of last-second saves in the clutch there by Tung. He played very well. But he made a save here. You immediately get some pushing and shoving, and that basically set the tone for the entire night. You had Jackson Dorrington, who was in the middle of some of this. He ended up scoring a goal that made it 2-0 in favor of the Rangers. He impressed in this two-game set as well. Evan Passmore jumped into the scrum as well. And then not too long after this, again, a little bit later in the first period, Brandon Othmann takes a one-timer. The save is made, and play is stopped. But Yaroslav Smolash, like we mentioned just a second ago, he's right in the middle of it. Then we had somebody going after Gabe Perreault during this little scrum here. And look, Perreault can stand up for himself, like we were talking about earlier. He had some muscle this offseason, and that's all well and good. But he's not somebody that's known for playing like a rough and tumble style of game. So as soon as a Flyer went after Perreault, great job by Brandon Othmann. He jumped all over him. And this is what we were talking about with Othmann coming into the series. We'd love to see him, get a whole bunch of points, and he did that too. But the biggest thing we needed to see from Othmann was him go out there and really assert himself, really get in some guys' faces, really play a physical brand of hockey, and he did all that and then some. And even between the whistles here, standing up for a teammate, very, very impressive for Brandon Othmann. So apparently he threw a punch during all this, and I don't know that for sure because we had the scrum, and then it looked like everything was dying down, and the camera was elsewhere. I believe it was pointed at the penalty box at this time, but then it apparently picked up again, and apparently Othmann took a swing at one of his opponents and ended up going to the penalty box for it. So apparently he threw his glove at him too. It would have been nice to see this, but unfortunately the Flyers cut away too early, and it's fine. I mean, look, it's a rookie series. You don't expect it to be, state-of-the-art coverage the way it is during the regular season, and I can't complain too much because at least the Flyers cover these two games. The Rangers don't, so at least they gave us something. Would have been nice to see all these extracurriculars here, though, with Brandon Othmann. But then again, you've got another series where, again, Smolash is right in the middle of everything. You had a situation where Bryce McConnell-Barker really hustled to prevent an icing against the Rangers, and then there was a stoppage just a couple of seconds after this, and then him and Smolash were in there mixing it up with the Flyers as well. It's getting ugly for sure. You also had a situation where Noah Laba at the very end of the first period, this is all in the first period, by the way. Noah Laba is down on the ice. The clock is running out. He ends up taking a backhand pass from his knees at the final second. Now, the Flyers might tell you that the horn had sounded and the period was over. And yes, technically it was. I don't know how fast they expected Laba to react to that, though. It would have had to have been an instantaneous reaction for him to not shoot. But he took the shot. They didn't like it. Two Flyers basically jumped on him while he was down on the ice. And then again, you've got a couple of Rangers jumping in there as well. Morrow, Perreault, Othmann again. So this got nasty, this got ugly, but I think this is good. These are young players, and you're getting a taste of NHL action here. I mean, it's not NHL proper, but these are all NHL hopefuls. There are guys in this game. They're going to end up playing in the NHL. Some of them already have, obviously. This is all good stuff. But Smolash is the one that really stood out in terms of the extracurriculars. The second period, there's a stoppage in front of the Flyer net, and he's in there, and he's getting into it with basically everybody on the Flyers. Then there was also a situation very early in the third period. There was a play stoppage, and he was barking at the Flyer bench during said play stoppage. So this is nice to see. Smolash, I didn't realize, I knew he was big, I didn't realize he was an absolute skyscraper like he apparently is. 6'5", 220 pounds. Obviously really stood out in these games for that reason, but he was also out there being kind of a bully as well. This is somebody that's going to have to use his size and his strength to his advantage. A former 5th-round pick by the New York Rangers, looking to turn some heads with some of this rough stuff, some of the extracurriculars like we've been calling it throughout this entire episode. But when you think of big players on the New York Rangers, your mind immediately goes to obviously Rempe, Edstrom as well, Dylan Robrick. He was standing out in these games as well. But man, I mean, Yaroslav Smolash, another late round, just giant of a hockey player. And as I've been saying over the years, when it comes to the Ranger draft strategy, I love the fact that late in drafts, they tend to target really big, really physical players. Now, you can do that early in the draft too, but by the time you're getting to the 5th round, the 6th round, the 7th round, and we've talked about this, there's only so much information that you have on all these players. There's only so many scouts in the world that can travel to different ends of the globe and watch these guys in action. But one thing when you're getting to the 5th round, the 6th round, the 7th round, is that if you draft somebody who's an absolute giant, and we'll use Smolash as an example here, again, 6'5", 220 pounds, size doesn't slump. So there's no can't miss prospect by this point in the draft anyway. You might as well just draft a giant. I mean, why not? You can work with him obviously in other areas of his game, but they definitely have a type, do the Rangers, when it comes to late in the draft. And I'm all for this. Get some cheap size, basically, is what you can call it. But as for Smolash, he seems to be something of a pet project for the New York Rangers. Has sort of what I would call a raw game right now. He did it up with 29 points in 71 games with the Pack last season. So modest offensive production in what was his first full season with the Hartford Wolfpack. But again, he was a late round pick, still just 22 years old. I get the feeling the Rangers right now, when it comes to Smolash, I don't think they have any designs on him playing with the Rangers, certainly on opening night this season. Probably not even the entire season. Now, I could be wrong about that. You never know what can happen. But I get the feeling they see him as a little bit more of a long-term project. And with that being the case, I think you could probably expect him to spend the entirety of this upcoming season with the Hartford Wolfpack. Again, there's no way to know that for sure. He could always exceed expectations. He get called up to the NHL on as-needed basis. You never know what can happen. If there's injuries, if there's ineffectiveness among the forwards in the bottom 6 for the Rangers, then maybe he does become an option. And maybe his offensive production increases with the Wolfpack. If that's the case, obviously we know he's got the size. He could be a call-up at some point this season, but I'm not really counting on it, if I'm being completely honest, at this point. So we'll call it there. A couple of announcements at the end of today's episode, though. The fantasy league is full. So I do apologize to anybody that reached out to me and did not get into the league. We have a 20-team league, and I would do more if it was possible, but that's the most teams that are allowed in the league on ESPN's website. So the league is full. We had 18 people return from last season to this year. There's only 2 new players. And with that being the case, obviously it means that we've got some lifers here apparently on Locked On New York Rangers, but it's crazy. I really was not expecting this many people to come back from last season. There's usually a decent amount of overturn. Last year, I think there were 8 or 9 new players, but there's some people that really seem to enjoy doing this. And, for returning players, we got to give them first dibs. So it is what it is. Again, I do apologize if we couldn't get you into the league. Hopefully everybody understands and you'll continue to watch Locked On New York Rangers or listen to Locked On New York Rangers despite that. One other announcement, if you have a story from an interaction with Sam Rosen, or if you have a story about what you were doing, who you were with, how you reacted when Stefan Mattos scored in double overtime against the Devils, then definitely feel free to send those stories my way. We will be reading them on a future episode of Locked On New York Rangers. But I figure we can call it there for today. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, that is @JCHIK17, and definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.